Good evening, and tonight the story begins in Frankfurt's Judengasse, a lane so narrow it smells of tallow, parchment, and coin, with gates locked from sunset to sunrise, where a simple red house sign will carry one family name from bent ledger shelves to the marble corridors of 5 European capitals. It is lovely to have Nina in Melbourne back again, and Owen in Nova Scotia too, after they both commented on the last video and stayed to the very end. If it suits this quiet hour, say where you are and what time it is in the comments, just like Nina and Owen, and please like and subscribe so there is always another calm history to fall asleep with. Have you ever wondered how a family name can begin with nothing grander than a painted sign over a crowded door? Now the street gate is shut, and Frankfurt grows small around him. The cobbles hold the day's damp cold, while warm tallow, old paper, and the faint metal scent of handled coins hang in the air. Inside the house of the Red Shield, Moses Amschel Bauer is already turning a coin toward the candle, and young Mayer is watching as if the silver might speak. The Judengasse is only one lane. 2 people can pass there, though both may need to turn a shoulder and forgive the closeness. The upper floors lean so near that the windows seem tempted to shake hands. The houses crowd the lane with the patience of old habits. Wood presses against plaster, and plaster presses back. Nothing here wastes space on elegance. At sunset, the gates are locked. They stay locked until sunrise, which makes the lane a neighborhood and a box at once. It is a gated community in the most literal and least glamorous sense. The city seems to think this arrangement perfectly reasonable. Cities often do, when the inconvenience belongs to someone else. Inside the gates, people simply get on with living. Night in the lane has its own sounds. A cough comes through a wall. A late spoon scrapes a bowl, and someone farther down settles a crying child with the same soft tune as yesterday. By day, the street is never silent. Pans knock, babies complain, shoes scrape, and someone is always carrying something that feels too large. A cartwheel protests at the stones and then continues anyway. Laundry drips from lines overhead. Soup steam slips from doors, and every smell pays a short visit to everyone else. Bread, onions, smoke, damp wool, lamb fat, and cabbage all take their turn. Privacy exists here mostly as a generous idea. A plaster wall is less a barrier than a polite suggestion. A pot lid falls, and half the lane knows which kitchen dropped it. For a child, this means there is always something to hear. For a merchant, it means there is always something to know. Mayer is already learning the use of both conditions. In streets like this, house signs matter. Doors are known by pictures long before numbers become reliable company. A painted image does the work that a street address will later pretend was easy. The Bauer family lives at the sign of the Red Shield. In German, that is Rothschild. History begins here in the most practical way imaginable, by pointing at a door. No one standing under the sign would call it grand. It is painted wood, weathered at the edges, and useful before it is impressive. Rain has taken a little color from it, though not enough to make it forget its purpose. Other houses nearby carry other signs. There are animals, tools, colors, and bits of borrowed pride. The Red Shield simply proves more memorable than most. From time to time, the paint is freshened. A brush goes over the red again, and the shield wakes back up. Even a future dynasty, it turns out, needs the occasional touch-up. Inside, the front room serves as shop, office, study, and neighborhood listening post. Moses Amschel Bauer runs a small coin and currency exchange there. He buys and sells old coins, and he changes one kind of money into another. Frankfurt loves trade, and trade loves confusion. Travelers arrive with purses full of different coins and complete faith that the world should accept them all. The world does not always share that faith. So men and women come to Moses with questions, small hopes, and the mild panic of arithmetic. They want clarity, and perhaps a slightly better rate than yesterday. They especially want the better rate to be granted as a personal kindness. No one in this room has yet met Wilhelm of Hesse-Kassel in his full later form. Still, the type already exists. There is always somebody who asks for a favor and presents it as a gift. The counting room is small, though it feels large to Mayer. Shelves bend under ledger books, folded letters, little paper packets, and trays lined with worn velvet. The room smells of dust, glue, wool, and metal warmed by human hands. The velvet has gone smooth in places. It keeps coins from skittering, and it lends them a softness they have not earned. Silver looks almost gentle when it lies still on red cloth. A pair of scales waits on the table. Beside it sit small weights, a magnifying glass, and a knife for testing edges. Each tool has a place, and each place has been learned by use rather than by ceremony. The candles are tallow, not the sweeter wax richer homes may burn. They smoke a little, and the room accepts this without protest. The flame makes the coins blink when Moses turns them. By the window there is better light during the day. It falls in a narrow strip because the lane is so close and the opposite house is almost a second curtain. Mayer has learned to love that strip of light anyway. Moses has hands made for careful work. He lifts a coin with finger and thumb as if he is holding both money and evidence. He tilts it, studies the face, then studies the rim, then studies the person who brought it. That last part interests Mayer most. A coin tells one story, but a face often tells another. His father checks both with the same patient expression. The boy learns early that value does not live in metal alone. It lives in trust, memory, and the length of a pause before a reply. It also lives in whether a man meets the eye or prefers the floorboards. Mayer stands close enough to see and far enough not to be scolded. This is a useful distance for a child in a counting room. He knows where to put his hands when the trays are open. His coat is plain wool and slightly scratchy at the neck. One cuff has gone shiny where it rubs against the table edge. His shoes have already learned the shape of the lane's uneven stones. He came downstairs a little while ago by a stair worn smooth at the center. The basin water had been cold enough to bring him fully into the day at once. The linen towel was rough, which is another way of saying honest. Now he is warm again by the candle and the stove. The room holds heat better when people keep moving through it. In houses like this, warmth is a shared project. A neighbor has brought 3 old silver pieces this morning, or what passes for morning under such a narrow sky. Moses turns the first coin slowly. He taps it once on wood and hears its small, clear ring. The neighbor relaxes at once. People come for money, but they also come for that tiny nod. It means the coin is honest, and the day need not become more difficult. Moses weighs the second piece. He looks at the clipping on the edge, then at the man who offered it. The man begins to explain before he is asked, which is usually informative. Moses only smiles a little. He says what the coin is worth now, not what it might once have been. Everyone seems grateful for clear disappointment when it arrives calmly. Later, a butcher's wife appears with mixed coins from several markets. She wants them sorted into something a landlord will accept without discussion. This is not romance, but it is very nearly civilization. Her apron still carries the smell of her shop. She empties the purse with a brisk motion that suggests no one should waste her time. Moses does not waste it. After her comes a student with a single old piece from a relative. He asks too casually what it might fetch, which means he cares very much. He also tries to look older than he is, which fools nobody. Moses answers each visitor in the same even voice. He does not rush the nervous ones, and he does not flatter the confident ones. His trade depends on numbers, but his manner depends on steadiness. Sometimes a customer wants old coins for collecting. Sometimes he wants only reliable money for an ordinary payment and a quieter life. Moses serves both wishes with the same table and the same scales. There is no grand sign outside saying finance happens here. It looks more like a careful man, a crowded room, and a child learning not to interrupt. Yet the bones of a very large future are already present. The coins themselves make a little museum in the hand. Some show emperors with stern noses. Some show saints, eagles, shields, or crowns rubbed almost flat by too much touching. Mayer learns their sizes first. Then he learns their weight, their color, and the different shine of silver that has traveled widely. A new coin gleams in one way, and an old, trustworthy coin in another. There are old Carolingian pieces that seem to carry dust from vanished courts. There are newer issues that already look tired from too much work. Mayer likes the old ones best. They feel like messages sent badly forward through time. Half the message is worn away, but enough remains to stir the mind. A boy can do a great deal with half a message. Moses teaches him to watch for clipped edges and false confidence. Counterfeit money is often betrayed by eagerness before it is betrayed by metal. The lesson is useful in more ways than one. He also teaches him to feel weight in the palm. A good coin has a quiet certainty to it. A bad one can look handsome and still arrive with the manners of a liar. Moses does not only know coins, he knows who brought them last year, who married whom, and who always asks for mercy while wearing new shoes. This too is part of the business. In the Judengasse, news moves faster than soup can cool. A stranger's boots may be discussed by 3 households before he reaches the next doorway. Mayer listens while pretending not to. He notices footsteps as much as faces. One person comes up the lane with a dragging heel. Another announces herself by the firm speed of her knock alone. Even before he can value money, he can value patterns. On fair days, the room grows busier. Frankfurt brings traders together, and traders bring their coins, their complaints, and their confidence. The table fills, the trays empty, and the ledger thickens. The ledger itself is a serious object. Its pages are rough under the hand, and its leather cover has darkened with use. When Moses opens it, the room seems to stand a little straighter. He writes in a measured hand. The pen scratches, pauses, and scratches again. Then sand is shaken lightly across the wet ink, so the words do not smear. Mayer watches the sand almost as closely as the sums. Small things interest him, because small things decide whether larger things work. This habit will prove very profitable later. It holds cooking, washing, prayer, mending, storage, and the ordinary labor of fitting life into little space. Every shelf has 2 duties, and every hook on the wall has 3. Beds become seating by day. Chests become tables when required. A folded blanket waits with the patience of an object that knows it will be needed again within hours. The blanket is heavy wool, and still carries a faint lanolin smell. A shirt drying near the stove stiffens at the seam, then softens only after wearing. Nothing here is delicate, but much is durable. From the kitchen comes a pot of soup built from patience. It holds barley, onion, a little root, and whatever else has chosen not to be wasted. A crust of bread waits beside it like an old friend. Bowls are plain, and spoons are plain, and everyone is grateful for them. Ordinary things do a great deal of history's work. They simply do not get painted into many portraits. Evening closes the rooms in around the family. Candles shorten, voices lower. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor folds up the day with a final sweep across the floorboards. When the gates are closed, the world beyond the lane still sends in its bells. They cross the dark without asking permission. The people inside hear them and carry on with their own time. It is a strange arrangement, and the city thinks it sensible enough. Mayer, being young, absorbs it first as fact rather than as argument. A child often meets the world by texture before thought. Such limits can teach 2 opposite habits. One is restlessness, the other is close attention. Mayer learns the second first. He watches how his father stacks coins by kingdom, prince, and city. Little towers rise, then flatten, then rise again in better order. Disorder, in this room, is only a temporary stage on the way to meaning. He watches worn notes being checked, counted, folded, and tied. Paper has manners of its own, and Moses knows them too. Some papers arrive crisp and proud, and others arrive like laundry after rain. Mayer begins to test himself in small private games. He tries to recall which drawer holds Dutch pieces and which tray carries clipped thalers. He is pleased when memory returns the answer at once. Soon he counts faces as well as coins. A man with a blue cuff asks for change twice a month, and always sighs before naming the sum. A woman with careful speech always brings exact thread to tie her purse. He notices that certain customers stroke their beards when uncertain. Others grow cheerful the moment they hear good silver strike good wood. These things matter, even if no ledger records them. The lane also runs on custom as much as trade. Lamps are trimmed, bread is cut, blessings are said, and children are sent on errands that grow longer once friends appear. Nothing here is grand, and everything here is regular. Regular things teach endurance, which is usually the only way it lasts. Mayer is receiving this lesson without being told he is in school. Some visitors come with more story than money. Moses still hears them out, because accounts are not the only thing kept in balance. A delay, a recommendation, or the right introduction can be as useful as coin. This is another lesson for the boy. Wealth is not only what sits in a tray. Wealth is also who trusts a door enough to knock on it. Bit by bit, The house sign becomes more than an address. People say the family from the Red Shield, that shorten the thought and keep the shield. Names often begin in this lazy, practical way. Posterity later behaves as if a trumpet sounded. In truth, a family name usually settles in like dust on a shelf. It gathers quietly until everyone agrees it has always been there. Mayer does not yet know how far that name will travel. He only knows the sign well enough to find home in poor light. He already understands the comfort of being remembered. Years from now, people will speak of 5 sons in 5 cities and draw neat lines across maps. They will use words like dynasty, network, and power. For now, the future is a boy beside a table, learning the weight of a coin. There will one day be couriers arriving at inconvenient moments with letters important enough to change a continent's mood. There will be princes asking for favors and forgetting gratitude on the way. There will be marble, titles, and very polished rivals. For the moment, none of that has entered the room. There is only the candle, the ledger, the tray, the scales, and Moses's patient hand. History is behaving like ordinary work again. A knock sounds at the doorframe, followed by the careful clearing of a throat. No one enters a counting room in the Judengasse without bringing either business or news. Moses does not look up at once. He finishes the weight already in his hand before giving the next person his eyes. Mayer notices that too. In this room, order is a form of kindness, and the next story waits its turn. In Hanover, the day began with cold light on window glass and the soft scratch of quills. Mayer stood in the Oppenheimer counting room with ink on his fingers and numbers in his head. He was still young enough to listen hard and old enough to understand why listening mattered. The room smelled of sealing wax, wool coats, and coin that had passed through many hands. Shelves held ledgers so fat they seemed to breathe when opened flat. A clerk shook fine sand over wet ink with the care of salting a winter path. At the Oppenheimer house, money rarely sat still for long. It arrived as silver, left as paper, and returned as promise. Mayer learned that a bill folded neatly could travel farther than a chest hauled by mules. He copied columns until the figures felt like the beat of a quiet song. He watched older men weigh coins on brass scales that tipped with tiny, stubborn opinions. He learned which gold pieces rang clean and which sounded tired. He also learned the great banking skill of appearing unhurried while everyone else worried privately. That art was worth almost as much as capital. It required a level face, a steady hand, and no PowerPoint presentation whatsoever. Letters came from cities with grand names and muddy streets. They asked for exchange, credit, delay, or forgiveness in tones that were all different and all familiar. Mayer saw how a polite answer could move more than an angry demand. In the mornings, a servant brought coffee dark enough to correct bad habits. In the afternoons, wax dripped red on folded paper and cooled into neat little moons. By evening, the room looked as though arithmetic itself had grown tired and sat down. Apprenticeship meant errands as well as instruction. Mayer carried packets, copied inventories, and learned how to bow just enough. He noticed which clients liked speed, which liked flattery, and which wanted both at once. The Oppenheimer men dealt in more than coins alone. They handled exchange rates, remittances, and the endless paper bridge between one city and another. For a careful young man from Frankfurt, it was a useful school with expensive stationery. He learned that a prince could be clever in one matter and absurd in the next. He learned that merchants often preferred plain speech and exact sums. He learned that everyone, high and low, loved hearing that their request was nearly possible. By the time he returned to Frankfurt, his hands moved differently around paper and metal. He no longer saw a coin as only a coin. He saw weight, origin, trust, and the possible next favor hidden inside it. The Judengasse received him as it received everyone. It was narrow, crowded, and full of smells that never truly left the stones. Tallow candles, old parchment, damp cloth, and the iron tang of coin met him before any neighbor did. The lane was barely wide enough for 2 people with baskets to pass politely. Windows leaned close, as if the houses were sharing gossip over the street. At sunset, the gates closed, making it Europe's most exclusive gated community, with aggressively poor amenities. Mayer came back to the family trade with more skill than furniture. The stall was modest, and the shelves were not trying to impress anyone. A velvet tray, a scale, a lockbox, and a good eye had to do much of the work. He began rebuilding the coin business from that cramped address. He sorted old pieces by ruler, mint, year, and condition, then sorted them again by what a collector might dream about. Dust gathered on cuffs, and silver brightened under cloth. There were Roman pieces with worn noses and medieval medals with saints softened by fingers. There were little envelopes with notes in careful script and dates added later. There were boxes that clicked shut with the satisfaction of a finished thought. A coin shop was never only a coin shop. It was a reading room, a rumor post, and a place where bored men with titles discovered new desires. Rare metal gave them something safe to chase between meals. Mayer arranged his trays as if he were setting a table for very particular guests. The brighter coins sat where the light could flatter them. The stranger pieces waited slightly behind, like shy cousins who became interesting after supper. Customers came for one object and stayed to talk about 10 others. A nobleman might ask about a medal and leave asking about exchange between Frankfurt and Kassel. Mayer noticed this with the calm of a man finding a second door in a familiar wall. At home, Gödel kept the household moving with a briskness that needed no trumpet. The house held children, cloth, dishes, books, and obligations in proportions that ignored common sense. She treated all this as a practical puzzle and solved it daily. She was not impressed by grand names on letters. She was impressed by soup arriving hot and stockings being found in pairs. In later years, palaces would fail to tempt her, which is the clearest proof of character anyone could ask for. For now, Mayer worked in rooms where every surface had two jobs. A chest stored coin and also served as a seat. A table held supper, accounts, and occasional children, though not always in that order. He had learned in Hanover that paper could widen a room, so he widened this one with letters, notes, and careful records. When the lane felt tight, the ledger opened and made Frankfurt touch other cities. Collectors loved old coins because age made them seem serious without requiring actual effort. It was a splendid hobby for aristocrats with too much time and very little desire to garden. Mayer began to prepare a catalogue of rare pieces with patient, almost domestic care. He described each coin by ruler, metal, portrait, size, and the small defects that made it believable. He knew that exact words could polish silver from several miles away. He sat under uneven light and drafted entries in a clear hand. One coin had a clipped edge like a bitten biscuit. Another showed a laurel crown so crisp it seemed to resist the passing centuries on principle. Catalogues were part list and part invitation. They let a distant nobleman imagine ownership before spending anything. This was, in its way, 18th century online shopping, though with better handwriting and fewer baskets abandoned halfway through. Mayer sent copies where curiosity and money were likely to live together. One of them reached Wilhelm of Hesse-Kassel, who adored order, advantage, and the idea of paying slightly less than everyone else. He had the collector's eye and the client's exhausting soul. Wilhelm liked coins because they made history fit into a drawer. He liked dealers who answered quickly and never forgot a detail. He liked exchange rates most of all, especially when they bent kindly in his direction, like obedient reeds. The first reply from Kassel was interested, measured, and mildly demanding. A second letter followed with questions about rarity, price, and delivery. By the third, Wilhelm was already requesting a more favorable rate as a personal courtesy. He never once said thank you. This became a kind of household weather. One learned to expect it, prepare for it, and perhaps put on an extra layer. Mayer answered with patience sharpened by practice. He supplied descriptions, prices, and choices without sounding either eager or offended. He knew that princely vanity preferred to approach the shop door as if it had been invited by destiny. The connection deepened through small, exact satisfactions. A requested medal arrived correctly wrapped. A doubtful date was checked against another specimen and confirmed. Nothing dramatic happened, which is often how important things begin. In the Judengasse, good news still had to share space with ordinary life. Children ran through rooms with ribbons, crusts, and sudden opinions. A pot simmered on the fire, while Mayer drafted a letter that might shift his fortunes by a careful inch. The soup smelled of onions, parsley, and bones cooked to gentleness. Bread dried on a shelf near folded linen. Gödel could discuss household expenses while hearing a baby stir in another room, which was a talent bankers could only admire from afar. More letters came from Wilhelm, and each carried the same polished strain. He wanted this medal, that coin, and a better price than arithmetic preferred. Every request suggested that accommodating him would be a pleasure and perhaps a duty. Mayer kept replying. He did not rush, but he did not disappear. A lesser man might have grown tired of serving a client who acted like the sun around which exchange rates should revolve. Instead, Mayer became useful in more than one way. When Wilhelm wanted a purchase arranged or money shifted neatly, the coin dealer could help. A tray of metals opened into a conversation about paper, timing, and trust. This was the true hinge beneath the polished metal. Coins brought princes to the table, but bills of exchange kept them seated. A collector's hobby turned into business because money always preferred company. Early bills of exchange were plain enough to look harmless. They were sheets of paper carrying instruction, credit, and reputation in a tidy hand. They spared clients the trouble of moving chests that clanged, tempted thieves, and annoyed horses. Mayer had seen this system at Oppenheimer, and now he used it in Frankfurt. A merchant could pay in one city and draw funds in another. Distance became less of a wall and more of a long corridor. He began on a scale suited to the rooms he had. Small loans went to traders who needed time between purchase and sale. Payment dates were noted carefully, and each note rested inside the ledger like a pressed leaf. There were cloth dealers waiting on customers. There were jewelers with stock tied up in slow seasons. There were men who needed coin today and would have paper tomorrow, which is one of civilization's oldest songs. Mayer did not pretend these operations were grand. He counted, checked, and folded like a man mending a hem before anyone noticed the tear. Yet each modest transaction trained others to trust his hand and his name. The counting house shelves bowed a little under growing ledgers and velvet trays. Red ribbons marked active accounts. Sand for drying ink sat beside sealing wax, as if paperwork and candle making had become reluctant business partners. Sometimes the breathless courier appeared at the exact moment Mayer had finally sat down. He arrived mud-splattered and apologetic, holding a sealed letter like a priest carrying a wafer. His timing remained flawless in the least convenient possible sense. The letter might contain a request from Kassel or a payment instruction from elsewhere. It might ask for coin, credit, or a clarification that had already been clarified twice. Mayer would break the seal, read calmly, and reach for the ledger again. Usefulness gathered around him slowly, which is the most durable way for it to gather. Traders returned because their sums had been handled correctly. Noble clients returned because their vanity had been handled even more correctly. In time, Wilhelm's favor hardened into something more official. Mayer was granted the title of Hofactor, a court agent attached to princely business. The words looked crisp on paper and carried a good deal of practical weight behind them. Titles mattered because the world liked labels even when it pretended otherwise. This one opened doors that were not always open to a Jewish dealer from the Judengasse. Letters traveled with more authority, and officials read them with fewer wrinkles in the forehead. The title also helped with permits, protection, and the ordinary frictions of trade. Goods moved more smoothly. Disputes could be pressed with firmer fingers. Respectability, once stamped by a court, became a kind of portable furniture. He was still Mayer in the same cramped house with the same street outside. The tallow smell did not vanish because a prince approved of his services. Guttel remained unimpressed, which was probably very healthy for everyone concerned. She could glance at the new distinction and ask whether the coal had been ordered. She could hear of court favor and wonder who had mended a sleeve. Her system for ranking importance did not include flattery and was stronger for it. Yet the title mattered deeply in business. It turned acquaintance into position. It let clients see not just a dealer of interesting objects, but a man whom courts already trusted with delicate errands. That trust fed the work already underway. More exchange business passed through his hands. More small loans knit local trade together. The coin trays still gleamed, but the paper beside them grew into the larger story. Mayer understood the pleasure of old metal and the power of new paper. One spoke to memory, and the other spoke to movement. He built something patient from very little space. On some evenings he closed the ledger while the street outside settled toward curfew. The gate would shut, bolts sliding home with their usual lack of romance. Inside, candles burned low, and a prince's business waited beside the family supper bowls. There was no sudden thunderclap of greatness. There were only repeated acts done properly in a narrow lane. A catalog, a letter, a favor, a title, and then another day's work. That is how the foothold formed. It did not look like destiny from the table where Mayer sat. It looked like coin dust on cloth, neat columns of figures, and a client in castle asking for a better rate again. In the Judengasse house, the morning begins before the light fully reaches the window glass. The lane outside is barely wide enough for two careful people. It smells of tallow candles, old parchment, damp wool, and the iron tang of coin. Inside, Mayer Amschel Rothschild wakes to the soft thud of small feet overhead. He hears a drawer stick, a pan lid ring, and Gödel already giving instructions. There are 10 children in a house that would now be praised as efficient. Nobody in the house would waste energy on praising it. The bed linen is cool at the edges and warm at the middle. A folded shirt waits on a chair with yesterday's careful mending. He dresses in steps he could do half asleep. Shirt first, then waistcoat, then coat, then the small daily search for a stocking. Somewhere, someone is arguing over bread ends with great moral seriousness. Somewhere else, someone is laughing with a mouth still full. Gödel moves through it all with the calm of a person who long ago accepted the size of the room. She never accepted, even for a moment, the size of everyone else's needs. She has a hand on the pot before the steam rises too fast. She has another hand, somehow, on a collar that needs straightening. Breakfast is plain and steady. There is dark bread, a little cheese, and soup thinned from yesterday, with barley and onion. A child reaches too quickly for the spoon. Gödel taps the table once, and order returns as if it had only stepped outside. The kitchen smell clings to the house all day. So does beeswax, damp linen, and a trace of ink from Mayer's fingers. A basket of stockings waits near the hearth for darning. A row of shoes stands by the door like tired little horses. The younger children share space with blankets, stools, chests, and a family that seems to breed additional elbows overnight. Every shelf carries bowls, folded cloth, ledgers, or all three at once. If a visitor stands in the passage, he can feel the whole house breathing. It is one of Europe's most exclusive gated communities, though the gates face inward, and the amenities are aggressively absent. Gödel knows where everything is. She knows which spoon is cracked, which child dislikes cabbage, and which shirt can survive one more washing. She also knows which son is dawdling on purpose. This knowledge saves more time than many elegant systems. Mayer watches her set the morning in motion while he takes bread in 2 neat bites. He is the father of the family, but she is its weather. When a child cries, she can tell by the sound if the trouble is hunger, tiredness, or theater. It is usually one of the first two. Sometimes it is all three. A kettle hums on the hook above the fire. The window glass beads with a little breath and kitchen steam. The older boys slip in and out of the main room with practiced sideways movements. They carry books, caps, scraps of paper, and the solemn look of boys who know errands matter. Mayer notices these things even while he counts. A father in a counting house learns to read sons like ledgers. Amschel, the eldest, stays close to Frankfurt habits. He is steady with keys, drawers, and the old rooms that hold the family roots. Salomon has a smoother manner with strangers. Nathan carries impatience like another pocket watch. Carl has ease, and James has a bright, quick finish. None of this arrives as a trumpet blast. It arrives in years of soup, shoes, handwriting, and the way each boy answers a question. Mayer tests them in ordinary ways. He asks one to copy figures, another to sort coins, and another to wait without fidgeting. Waiting without fidgeting turns out to be its own rare skill. Nathan, in time, treats the idea with open suspicion. The shelves in the counting room bow under ledgers and velvet coin trays. A map of Europe lies nearby, folded and opened until the corners feel like cloth. Frankfurt is not the end of Mayer's thinking. It is the table where he spreads out the pieces. He knows the lane is narrow, but money travels wider than stone streets do. Princes want loans, merchants want credit, and every city wants to think itself central. He begins to see his sons not only as sons, but as doors. Each door opens onto a different capital. The plan sounds simple when history tells it afterward. 5 sons will go out, and 1 family will remain 1 family. Simple plans are often stitched from many tiny domestic acts. A shirt must be packed before an empire can be financed. Amschel will remain in Frankfurt. close to the ledgers and the old ground. Someone must stay where the roots are thickest. Solomon will go where the Habsburg world likes order, polish, and respectable paper. Vienna will suit his measured step. Nathan will cross to London, where trade moves fast and money pretends not to sleep. He will write home asking why everyone else seems to. Karl will go south toward Naples, where courts and merchants need tact as much as cash. James will be sent to Paris, young but sharp enough to learn quickly. Mayer does not announce this plan over a grand dinner with candles and dramatic pauses. He works it out at tables covered with crumbs, bills, and sealing wax. He watches the boys bargain over small things. He watches them copy addresses, greet clients, and keep their tempers tidy. Gödel watches too, though she is not given to speeches about strategy. She asks better questions than speeches ever answer. Will he eat properly there? Can he keep his shirts clean? Does he know how often to air a mattress? Can he write clearly when tired? These are not small questions. Dynasties like laundry fail when neglected in corners. The house begins to feel like a place with trunks in it. Cloth is folded, lists are made, and names of cities are spoken with practical mouths. A mother measures what each son will need. She knows how many shirts look respectable before they become luggage. There are stockings rolled into shoes to save space. There are brushes wrapped in cloth, inkstands corked tight, and a little packet of thread because buttons have no respect for ambition. One son gets a warmer coat, another gets extra linen, a third gets advice repeated twice because he is clever enough to ignore the first version. The boys leave in stages, and yet they never quite leave. Their places remain at the table, and their names remain in the room. Soon the family learns to live by letters as much as by footsteps. Paper becomes another kind of presence. Mayer's desk is a steady landscape of folded sheets, wafer seals, and sharpened quills. Sand waits in a small dish to dry the ink. He writes in a hand trained by trade, not vanity. His letters have work to do, and no time for flourishes. The family uses Judendeutsch when it suits them, and a cipher when it suits them even more. Outsiders reading along are invited to feel puzzled in silence. Names can shift on the page. Meanings can hide in familiar words. Prices, routes, and intentions travel best when they travel half disguised. It is 18th century email, though with better delivery rates than modern broadband and far better wax seals. Nobody in Frankfurt says this, but the thought would have pleased Nathan. A letter may mention cloth and mean coin. It may mention weather and mean markets. It may say enough for a brother, while saying very little for everyone else. Mayer reads each line with the care of a man handling both paper and consequence. He can hear each son's voice inside the neat scratches. Amschel's letters feel orderly, even before they are opened. Nathan's feel impatient through the seal. Nathan in London asks for more capital, faster couriers, and an explanation for delay. He is usually correct, which makes family harmony mildly inconvenient. Solomon writes with tact and useful detail. Karl notices people and tone. James, when young, sends letters with quick, bright edges that sharpen over time. The breathless courier arrives, as he always does, at the moment Mayer has just sat down. He stands mud-spattered in the doorway with a sealed letter and an apology he has used many times. He has never once been late. He has also never once been convenient. Gödel takes the wet cloak before it drips on the floorboards. Someone passes the man bread, because importance does not prevent hunger. Mayer breaks the seal with his thumb and reads while the room goes on around him. A spoon falls, a child coughs, and history continues in very ordinary sounds. The letters cross cities and courts, but they always come home to the same habits. Figures are checked twice. Rumors are weighed like worn coins. A favorable exchange rate is requested again by Wilhelm of Hesse-Kassel, naturally as a personal favor. He never says thank you, which by now has become almost decorative. Mayer answers with care and patience. A client may think himself indispensable for years without ever being corrected aloud. The brothers learn that speed matters, but trust matters more. Fast news without loyalty is only a gust of wind. So the family binds itself tightly. One thread is language, another is training, another more intimate and more old-fashioned is marriage. At the table, names of cousins are spoken with the same calm used for discussing rent. The modern heart may want violins, but the ledger prefers certainty. The family chooses spouses from within the wider kin circle, more often than outsiders find charming. Capital likes to stay where it already knows the cupboards. This is not treated in the house as romance defeated by arithmetic. It is treated as the practical joining of affection, trust, and very careful inventory. A daughter brings dowry and kin ties. A son brings business and a share in the name. Both bring long visits, family dinners, and a great many opinions. Guttel weighs character with the plain eye she uses on vegetables at market. Is the person reliable? Can they keep accounts? Will they stir trouble for sport? Beauty is pleasant, of course. Reliability keeps the house from sinking. Marriage papers sit near trade papers more often than poets would like. Mayer sees no reason to apologize to poets. He has watched too many fortunes slip through weak hands, charming hands, or unrelated hands. Family capital, once scattered, has a talent for forgetting the way home, so loyalty is folded inward like linen in a crowded chest. The family keeps money near and keeps news nearer. This arrangement is not cozy in every moment, though it is familiar. Familiarity can be a form of comfort stronger than novelty. Children grow up knowing uncles who are also partners, and cousins who may someday be both kin and spouse. Strange, perhaps, to later centuries, but very tidy in a book of accounts. The house itself teaches this lesson by example. Everything that matters must fit together, because there is nowhere else to put it. By evening, the candles burn lower and the day softens around the edges. Ledgers close with a papery sigh. Mayer sometimes sits with a letter in one hand and a child asleep against the other arm. The family empire in its early shape feels exactly like that. Years later, when titles and honors begin to arrive, symbols follow them. A coat of arms appears, as coats of arms tend to do when success has become impossible to ignore. It bears 5 arrows. Nobody in the family mistakes them for decoration. The arrows stand for the 5 sons, held together as one bundle. 1 arrow can be snapped more easily than 5, which is a lesson old enough to need no improvement. The motto reads Concordia, Integritas, Industria. Harmony, honesty, hard work. Rendered in Latin because Europe likes its virtues dressed for company. Mayer would have understood the same ideas perfectly well in simpler words. Stay together. Be straight. Keep working. In the lamplight, the emblem can look grand to an outsider. To the family, it is almost a diagram. Frankfurt remains the center in feeling, even when business stretches to London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples. Marble corridors may come later, but the idea was born among crowded stairs and soup steam. Amschel keeps the old house rhythms near the books. Salomon smooths the path in Vienna. Nathan turns London into a workshop of restless scale. Karl makes himself useful in Naples, without fuss. James learns Paris and grows into it with quick, polished confidence. For outside, other bankers see separate offices, separate men, and ordinary correspondence. They do not quite see the whole machine. That suits Mayer very well. The best design is often the one mistaken for a family habit. The brothers write, lend, place funds, move coin, and share news before rivals have finished clearing their throats. They are not magical. They are organized. The bearings, polished as a silver tea service, will underestimate them with excellent manners. The ledger will answer in its own dry voice. Back in the Judengasse, Guttel remains unimpressed by grandeur from the first day to the last. If a thing works, she sees no reason to move it to a palace. She still notices loose hems before she notices honors. She still expects people to wipe their shoes. Mayer, for all his reach, never entirely leaves the habits of the lane. He knows what cramped rooms can teach that wide halls often forget. A narrow house has trained this family in closeness, memory, and use. Nothing is wasted, not even a scrap of paper or a son's particular talent. When the gates of the Judengasse close at sunset, the lane grows quieter. The day's last errands settle into night. Inside, someone folds cloth by candlelight. Someone adds a final figure. Someone yawns over a page. Mayer lays one more letter on the stack for morning. The wax cools, the room stills, and 5 arrows hold fast in the mind. The plan is never merely money. It is breakfast, handwriting, patched shirts, trusted brothers, and a mother who keeps the center from slipping. That is how the family spreads across Europe without coming apart. That is how a coat of arms becomes a household rule. And in the small Frankfurt house, with the smell of candle smoke and ink, the rule feels almost simple. Stay together, work steadily, and answer the letter before Nathan sends another. In the thin morning light of the Judengasse, Mayer Amschel Rothschild runs a thumb along a velvet coin tray. The nap lies one way, then the other. The room smells of tallow candles, old parchment, and the iron tang of coin. The lane outside is barely wide enough for two people to pass without discussing the matter first. A cartwheel scrapes the stones. Somewhere nearby, soup has already begun its steady little simmer. Amschel is there before the shutters are fully opened. He lifts the wooden bar with a practiced shoulder. He shakes out yesterday's dust cloth and folds it into a neat square. He is the eldest son, and he moves like a man who has already counted the day twice. He checks the scales with two small test weights. He straightens a stack of folded letters by tapping the edges against the table. Mayer watches him tie up coin bags with blue silk cord. The knots are small and even. Nothing about Amschel is theatrical, which in banking is a very helpful kind of charm. Frankfurt asks for steadiness more often than brilliance. Small courts in the German states want coins changed, payments moved, and awkward obligations made to look graceful. Amschel remembers who prefers silver, who insists on fresh sealing wax, and who always sends a servant with muddy boots. If you stood near the doorway, you would hear very little wasted speech. Numbers are read softly. Names are repeated once. The goose quill scratches like a mouse in the wall. Mayer likes that sound. It means the house is working. It means shelves bow under ledger books for a reason. The Judengasse is sometimes called a gated community by people who enjoy jokes with a pinch of vinegar. The gates do lock from sunset to sunrise. The amenities remain aggressively non-existent. Amschel steps out to the lane with a packet under his arm. He returns with a candle bill, 3 messages, and a report about exchange rates in Kassel. By the time he hangs his hat, the morning has already become a tidy column of useful facts. Gödel passes through with the household keys at her waist. They knock softly against each other like a private bell. She glances at the papers and decides as usual that paper never fed 10 children by itself. Breakfast appears in stages, because the house is always in stages. There is brown bread, a little cheese, and hot milk with a skin forming on top. Mayer peels the skin aside with a spoon and reads while he eats. A letter from Wilhelm of Hesse-Kassel arrives with a seal large enough to suggest the letter might contain gratitude. It does not. It asks for a better rate again, framed as a personal favor, and somehow never once says thank you. Mayer makes a small sound through his nose. Amschel does not even look surprised. Some habits are as regular as church bells, though less musical. It is Amschel who turns these princely wishes into something solid enough to book. He knows which courier can be trusted with a packet of notes. He knows which merchant in Hanau pays promptly, and which one must be reminded with extra politeness. He keeps Frankfurt as the anchor because anchors are heavy and useful. They do not glitter, they simply hold. By midday the room is warmer, and the tallow smell has grown sweeter. Ink dries on the page with a faint shine. Coins leave a cool dust on the fingers that no towel quite removes. The breathless courier appears at the exact moment Mayer has just sat down. He is mud-splattered, apologetic, and somehow still dignified. In one hand he holds a sealed letter of great importance, and in the other he carries the weather on his sleeves. The letter is from Vienna. Salomon's hand is narrower than Amschel's, and the lines look carefully lined up, like shoes at a door. Mayer turns the page toward the light, and begins again from the top. Vienna enters the room by way of description first. Waxed floors shine like still water. Court servants wear liveries so brushed and tidy that even dust feels underdressed. Salomon writes of waiting rooms more than audience rooms. This is already a useful lesson. In courts, as in banking, much depends on who is patient in the correct chair. He learns the habits of the Habsburg world with a calm face and polished boots. One clerk likes papers folded lengthwise, not crosswise. Another responds better after luncheon than before it, which is deeply human and therefore reliable. If you were beside Salomon in those corridors, you would smell starch, candle smoke, and wet wool drying near a stove. You would hear footsteps softened by carpets. You would also hear doors opening for some people more quickly than others. He does not hurry the doors. He lets them become used to him. This is one of his great gifts. Mayer smiles at a line about cuff buttons. Salomon has learned that the wrong button can start a longer conversation than the right balance sheet. Such are the tender mysteries of court life. Vienna likes form. and Salomon gives it form without giving away the substance. He sends clean copies, fair copies, and the copy behind the fair copy. He keeps names straight, titles straighter, and sums straightest of all. A tray comes in with onion soup for dinner. The broth is brown and sweet. Small islands of bread drift under melted cheese, which feels modern enough to deserve its own applause. Gödel asks whether Vienna has yet paid for its own fuss. Mayer says not entirely. She nods as if this confirms what she already suspected about empires. Salomon writes of lending not only money, but steadiness. The court wants roads, supplies, and settled obligations. He offers schedules, terms, and the quiet comfort of a bill that appears exactly when promised. He learns which porter accepts a nod and which one requires a phrase. He learns when to wear heavier cloth, because marble halls keep their own weather. He learns that patient silence often earns more than a clever answer. Another letter from Wilhelm follows a day later. It contains, with astonishing consistency, a request for a better exchange rate as a personal kindness. He remains the most exhausting important client in the story, which is an impressive and slightly boring achievement. By evening, Mayer's seal rests beside the lamp. The 5 arrows cut in the stone catch a little grease light. One house in Frankfurt now reaches, by ink and habit, into Vienna's polished maze. The next morning smells of wet wool because a bale has been opened in the yard. For a moment, Mayer thinks of Manchester. Nathan began there among cloth, invoices, and the steady practical misery of lint. Manchester taught Nathan weight, count, color, and patience with buyers who touched every bolt as if they had invented touching. He learned grades of wool by finger and eye. He learned how a damp day could change a warehouse mood faster than theology. Nathan's early letters mentioned dyed cottons, sample books, and wagons delayed by roads that resembled ambitious puddles. He knew prices by the yard and credit by the face. He could judge a man while folding a piece of cloth. Then London began to pull at him. London had deeper markets, quicker rumors, and government paper changing hands with the heat of fresh bread. Nathan saw that money itself could be traded with the same hard stare as cloth. If you stood near him in those first London rooms, you would smell coal smoke, sealing wax, and wet greatcoats steaming near the fire. You would hear street wheels, shouted prices, and the rustle of newspapers not yet fully dry from the press. He did not abandon cloth all at once. Nathan carried his old trade like a ladder while climbing another wall. More of his attention turned toward bills, bonds, and the pulse of the market. Mayer reads those letters twice because Nathan writes as if time itself owes him an explanation. There are requests for more capital, faster courier routes, and some gentle disbelief that the other 4 brothers are moving so slowly. He is usually right, which is inconvenient for everyone. The family courier network becomes, in these pages, something like 18th century email. The delivery rate is better than modern broadband. The wax seals are considerably more dramatic. Nathan discovers that government bonds suit his temperament. They are quick, large, and full of people pretending not to care very much. He cares very much, and with remarkable efficiency. He stands on the floor of the London Stock Exchange with such still concentration that other brokers begin using him as a landmark. One can imagine directions being given by Nobo Engel alone. It is, in a soft way, hilarious. The Baring brothers greet the family from Frankfurt with polished courtesy. Their manners are beautiful enough to frame. Their underestimation is equally beautiful and less profitable. Nathan learns London's habits down to the hour. He knows when the coffee tastes burned and when the prices soften. He knows which messenger can squeeze through Fleet Street fastest and which clerk sharpens every pen before 9. He sends home exact needs: more specie, more credit, more speed. The letters never quite say please, though they often imply that delays are a personal eccentricity of the universe. Mayer folds those sheets with great care. He remembers the boy in Manchester counting cloth links at a rough table. Now the same hands are moving government paper through London as if running a Regency-era hedge fund, only with better posture and actual pigeons. At supper, Amschel reports Frankfurt rates. Mayer answers with London rates from Nathan's last page. Gödel serves boiled beef with carrots and listens as if the whole of Europe were simply a disorderly pantry. A little later, another courier arrives exactly when everyone has sat down again. His boots leave damp half-moons on the floorboards. He apologizes with his eyebrows, and produces a letter from Naples. Karl's paper smells faintly of perfume and sea air, or perhaps Mayer is only susceptible to suggestion after a long day. Naples comes in warm colors, even the ink seems to have dried in better weather. Karl lives among shutters, tiled floors, and rooms made for echoing footsteps. Beyond the windows are sun, harbor light, and laundry hanging with more confidence than in Frankfurt. Inside are desks, account books, and the same old arithmetic wearing nicer clothes. The kingdom of the two Sicilies sounds grand, though grand things still need cash flow. Karl sorts revenues, debts, and promises into forms that can survive the week. He makes a kingdom's finances behave like a household drawer, which is harder than it sounds. If you sat in his office by late morning, you would feel the air thicken before noon. You would smell paper, lemon peel, and a little mold kept at bay by open windows. You would hear pens tapping glass inkwells and carriage wheels below. He learns which receipts arrive from ports and which from taxes inland. He learns when to trust a local calendar and when to trust the moon. He learns that damp air curls paper at the edges unless a ledger is weighted overnight. Karl does not swagger through Naples. He settles it, page by page. Payments are grouped, maturities are spread, and royal obligations begin to look less like spilled beads and more like a necklace again. A palazzo sounds impressive in family letters. She says a larger roof only means more roof to worry about. Mayer laughs at that and reaches for his spectacles. Karl has written about silver on side tables, polished floors under thin rugs, and officials who prefer afternoon visits after coffee. Some forms of government, it seems, run on caffeine and upholstery. He builds trust in the old family way. He arrives when expected. He remembers names. He sends what was promised in the amount promised, which remains one of history's most underrated forms of sorcery. Naples also wants more capital. Naturally, it does. The 5 cities are beginning to sound like one large household with expensive tastes. The arrows on Mayer's seal are not decorative to him. They are a household map. 1 point holds Frankfurt, 1 point reaches Vienna, 1 London, 1 Naples, and 1 now stretches toward Paris. James is the youngest abroad, and Paris does not make life simple for the young or for anyone else. It has changed governments so often that visiting cards almost need blank spaces left open. Yet it remains elegant while rearranging the furniture of public life. His first rooms are busy with callers and drafts. Wheels chatter over stone outside from early morning. Inside, the fire must be coaxed, the gloves dried, and the papers sorted before the first knock. If you stood by the window with James, you would smell chestnut smoke, horse leather, and bakery steam from the street. You would hear French spoken quickly enough to sound like silk being shaken out. It is a city with very little interest in whispering. James learns Paris by salon, office, and supper table. One minister prefers figures after dessert. Another is kinder before it, provided the napkin has been properly folded and the room is not too cold. He builds the Paris house patiently. He hires clerks who write a clean hand. He buys paper that takes ink without feathering. He makes sure the waiting room chairs are good enough to flatter a visitor into staying calm. The city around him is full of memory and motion. Old names remain on lips, new names appear on doors. James learns to keep his own tone level, while the wider world insists on costume changes. Mayer reads these reports while the Frankfurt lamp burns lower. He can almost see James crossing a room with measured steps. He can almost hear him choosing the exact polite phrase that promises much and reveals little. Paris needs confidence dressed as ease. James provides both. He sends market gossip, bond news, and requests for funds in sentences that look graceful, even when they are urgent. The Baring brothers watch all this from London with their fine manners intact. They continue to be courteous in exactly the way one is courteous, before discovering a miscalculation. The ledger, as ever, is less sentimental than the drawing room. In Paris, James also learns the softer duties of banking. A host must know where to place candles so faces look well. A banker must know where to place money so governments do. He notices table linens, carriage rugs, and the quality of sealing wax. These things are not trivial in such a city. Comfort often arrives 5 minutes before trust. Another day closes in the Judengasse. The gates will soon be locked for the night. The lane narrows into shadow, and the house gathers itself around lamplight, soup bowls, and the last pages still needing a signature. Mayer sits with the letters spread around him like a hand of cards. Amschel is steady in Frankfurt. Salomon waits skillfully in Vienna. Nathan pushes London to move faster, Carl tidies Naples, and James persuades Paris to sit down and talk. Guttel brings a folded cloth for the table and tells him not to drip wax on it. He promises obedience with the solemnity of a man who has already broken this rule before. She is, as usual, entirely unconvinced by male ceremony. He adds figures in the margin and scratches out one line before rewriting it more plainly. The sums travel outward, the trust travels back. This is the hidden shape of the family at work. It is not made of sudden thunder. It is made of habits, copies, couriers, warm rooms, exact promises, and sons in 5 cities all writing home the same sentence. Send more capital. Mayer warms the sealing wax above the candle and waits until it shines. He presses the 5 arrows into the red circle. Then he sets the letter aside to cool, like bread, and reaches for the next one. The map lies flat beneath Mayer Amschel Rothschild's hand before the house is properly warm. The paper smells faintly of paste and dust. A candle leaves a soft bead of wax near Frankfurt, where the lane outside is still damp from the night. The Judengasse wakes in its usual narrow way. A shutter opens. A pail scrapes stone. Somewhere nearby, tallow smoke mixes with old parchment and the iron smell of coin. Mayer does not begin with money this morning. He begins with roads. He looks at the lines between Frankfurt and Paris, between Vienna and Amsterdam, and on toward London, where Nathan is already awake enough for several men. The shelves in the counting room bend under ledgers and velvet trays. The trays hold stacked coin like obedient little moons. The ledgers hold something more useful, which is where everyone has been and how quickly news can be made to travel. A route is only a line on paper until a real horse stands on it. A relay is only an idea until a boy has rubbed down the mare, checked the girth, and filled the lantern. Mayer knows the price of both kinds of line. He keeps lists that look dull enough to frighten away curiosity. At one station there must be dry straw, at another there must be lamp oil, sealing wax, and a kettle that does not leak. Great financial systems are often upheld by humble kettles. The family's messengers move in stages across Europe. They know which bridge floods first. They know which inn serves broth quickly, and which one promises quick broth, and then goes to look for the chicken. Mayer likes men who remember practical things. He likes a courier who notices a loose wheel before a nobleman notices a late packet. He likes a stable yard with clean water more than he likes a speech about honor. The roads join the 5 houses more tightly than ribbon joins a parcel. Frankfurt sends to Paris, Paris sends to Vienna, Vienna sends to Naples, London sends to everyone, usually with the tone of a man tapping the table while the soup is still coming. Nathan's letters arrive thick with urgency and a touch of self-praise. He wants faster relays, more capital, and fewer excuses from brothers standing inconveniently on the wrong side of mountains. He is usually right, which makes breakfast slightly more tiring. Mayer folds one of those letters and slides it beneath a weight. The weight is a plain stone wrapped in cloth. It looks modest, which is often the best look for powerful things. Outside, a cart passes so close to the wall that both driver and wall seem offended. The lane is barely wide enough for 2 polite people. It is Europe's most exclusive gated community, except the gates face inward and the amenities are almost aggressively absent. Yet from this cramped lane, messages travel with a grace kings would envy. The first horse leaves before some clerks have found their pens. By the time an office has heated its room and argued about forms, a Rothschild packet is already crossing a river. There is no trumpet to mark this. There is only routine. A messenger checks a buckle, knots his cloak, and tucks a sealed packet under oilcloth as carefully as a mother wraps bread. The route is made of small habits repeated without fuss. The second rider waits at the next point with fresh gloves drying near a stove. A third man has already counted out oats into a pail because speed begins with not having to look for oats. The breathless courier appears, as he so often does, exactly when Mayer has just sat down. His boots are mud-marked to the knee. His expression says apology, though his timing suggests a private arrangement with inconvenience itself. He hands over 2 sealed letters and a folded note about road conditions. Then he accepts a mug of something hot with both hands. He never seems surprised that the fate of large sums can travel in the same pocket as a crust of yesterday's bread. Mayer breaks one seal and scans a line from Paris. He adds a mark in the ledger. Then he reaches for another sheet and sends an answer onward while the courier is still swallowing the last of his drink. That is the trick beneath the family's calm face. They do not wait for the postcart. They do not wait for a government desk to wake, stamp, sort, and remember where Belgium might be today. They answer while others are still uncapping the ink. At each relay station, the details remain satisfyingly ordinary. There are hooks by the door for wet cloaks. There is a bench worn smooth by men too tired to complain properly. There is always someone who says the road is fine, and then describes 3 separate disasters involving mud. The packet itself is neat and unfriendly to weather. Wax closes the folds, string crosses the back. Names and marks sit where practiced fingers can find them in poor light, without turning the whole thing around. Mayer's empire of information does not shimmer. It creaks. It smells of leather, damp wool, horse sweat, pine smoke, and sealing wax. It is run by men with cracked hands and excellent memories. Some nights a dispatch crosses more than one border before dawn. Some mornings a market price reaches a Rothschild desk before the local official has finished discussing whether his breakfast egg is trustworthy. History often imagines itself grandly, but it is usually late. In the Frankfurt house, Gödel keeps the domestic rhythm firm enough to support all this motion. 10 children, servants, visitors, clients, and letters all seem to arrive at once. She receives them with the calm of a general who would rather be mending linen. Mayer mentions a possible move to a larger house, only in theory. Gödel dismisses the idea in one glance and a folded napkin. Later, when the family owns palaces, she will still prefer the Judengasse, because in her view, a staircase is a staircase. The network tightens because someone must always be first. A price known at noon is one kind of fact. The same price known at 10 is another thing altogether, brighter and sharper, like seeing the loaf before the queue forms. Letters come from Vienna with grain prices and credit needs. Paris sends hints from salons and ministries, folded into ordinary trade talk. Naples reports shipping, weather, and whether a merchant's promise feels as thin as watered soup. London writes most loudly. Nathan wants news before his rivals breathe on it. On the stock exchange floor he can stand so still that other men use him as a landmark, which is not a common banking skill, but apparently has its uses. He needs facts earlier than the Baring brothers. The Barings are polished, correct, and perfectly tailored for underestimating people from Frankfurt. They do it with such good manners that one almost wants to thank them for losing so elegantly. Public post moves at the speed of the public post. A bag is sorted, a clerk pauses, a coach is delayed by weather, wheels, or a horse with delicate opinions. Meanwhile, the Rothschild packet has already changed hands twice and is asking for fresh oats. There are days when the family knows of a market turn, while rival houses still trust rumor. There are hours when a government knows less than a counting room in a lane locked at night. Power sometimes wears marble, and sometimes wool sleeves with ink on them. When the news must move faster still, horses are not the first choice. They are merely very good. For the sharpest edge, for the truly urgent line, the family turns to smaller wings. The pigeons are kept with a care that would please any grandmother. Their loft is clean and dry. Grain sits in bins that must be shut tight against mice. Water is changed often, because even financial genius cannot persuade a thirsty pigeon to be efficient. A bird feels light in the hand and stubborn in the eye. A tiny paper strip is folded small. The note is tucked with absurd delicacy, as if the fate of exchange rates were a matter of pinning a shopping list to a feathered loaf. Mayer likes the neatness of it. No hoof slips, no wheel breaks. The sky, for all its moods, does not usually ask for tolls at a gate. A pigeon cannot carry a ledger, of course. It cannot explain context, reassure a client, or complain about road food. It can only bring the urgent kernel, which is often enough when a price is drifting and a decision waits. From one city to another, the bird closes a gap that feels almost unfair. A line from Brussels, a scrap from Paris, a confirmation from a port, and suddenly men in one room know what another room still only suspects. It is rather like very early email, except the broadband has feathers. The household receives these quick notices with practiced calm. Someone notes the time, someone copies the message into a book, someone sends a fuller letter by road at once, because speed is lovely, but archives are forever. The codes matter here. A pigeon lost to weather is one thing. A letter opened by the wrong hands is another. Mayer prefers his meanings to arrive intact, and his enemies to remain mildly confused. So the family writes in ways that look plain only from a distance. There is Judendeutsch in the lines, familiar to the family and less friendly to strangers. There are agreed turns of phrase that mean more than they seem to mean. One word may stand in for a person, a harmless trade term may point to a government bond, a phrase about cloth may concern credit, and a note about weather may really be warning of temper in a ministry. The letters themselves look ordinary enough on the table. Cream paper, wax, a hand that hurries but does not sprawl. Yet an outsider opening one would meet a page that seems understandable in parts and slippery in the whole. Mayer enjoys this without making a show of it. He is not a man for theatrical secrecy. He simply knows that privacy is cheaper than panic and more useful than apology. Some letters carry a fuller cipher, especially on important days. Numbers shift to words, names shrink into marks. A clerk trained in the method can open sense from the page, like a cook opening a dumpling, while any interceptor is left holding only steam. This work is as domestic as it is clever. Pens must be cut properly. Sand must be dry for blotting. A candle must not drip on a margin that contains the one number everyone will care about tomorrow. A child in the house might see only adults bent over paper. A visitor might hear nothing more dramatic than scratching nibs and a chair moved back from the table. Yet whole markets can lean on a symbol correctly copied after supper. The coded notes pass among the brothers with the ease of family habit. Frankfurt reads London's urgency, Paris smooths it, Vienna adds detail, Naples sends local color, and whatever facts can be rescued from heat, delay, and official charm. Through all this, Wilhelm of Hesse-Kassel continues his own special form of correspondence. Every letter seeks a kinder rate than the last. Every request is framed as a personal favor. Not one says thank you, which saves ink if nothing else. Mayer answers him with patience, figures, and the kind of politeness that has edges only an accountant can hear. Wilhelm believes himself the indispensable party in this arrangement. He is wrong, and will live quite comfortably without learning it. The advantage over rival houses grows in quiet layers. It is not one magnificent secret. It is 10 small arrangements done well, 20 careful men, 30 stations supplied on time, and a habit of answering before others have understood the question. A banker using only public post works with older weather. He sees yesterday's road and nearly yesterday's price. He must guess a little more, cushion a little more, and trust a little more to luck, which is a shabby business partner. The Rothschild house trusts systems instead. It trusts duplicate copies. It trusts relays. It trusts birds and codes and brothers who argue in letters, because arguing means they are paying close attention. In the capitals, ministries compose notices with ceremony. There are drafts, there are signatures, there are sanded pages and folded copies, and a messenger who has gone to find the correct ribbon. By then, the family may already have the useful part. This does not make kings foolish, it only makes them large. Large things take time to move. A family business can pivot faster than a cabinet, especially when the cabinet is still discussing chairs. Sometimes the gap is only a few hours. That is enough. In markets, an hour can feel roomy, 2 hours can feel almost luxurious. By evening, what was once advantage has become merely common knowledge, which is much less profitable. Mayer knows the worth of those hours in his fingertips. He drums them once on the desk beside a sealed note, then he sends instructions onward with the calm of a man ordering more candles before winter, which in a sense he is. The counting room remains unshowy through all of this. The same worn surface holds coins, letters, and crumbs from a quickly eaten roll. The same shelf keeps ledgers beside wax and twine. Fortune, when properly managed, often looks like decent storage. Another courier comes in near dusk with wet hems and excellent news from Paris. He pauses at the threshold, because Guttel has just had the floor scrubbed. Even Europe's finest information network must wait one respectful moment for drying boards. He crosses, delivers, and accepts a plate without ceremony. Soup tonight is barley with onion, carrot, and a little marrow. Steam clouds his face while Mayer reads, and the room smells pleasantly of broth, wool, and hot wax. A coded phrase confirms a move in one market. A second line hints at another city's delay in hearing it. Mayer nods once, because the machinery is doing what it was built to do. He thinks, perhaps briefly, of the old coin trays and the rare pieces that first drew princes to his door. Those coins still matter. They shine, they charm, They remind men that value can be held in the hand. But the true engine now is lighter than gold and harder to keep. It runs on time, it runs on routes, it runs on a pigeon's breast, a rider's endurance, a brother's judgment, and a wife's refusal to let the household come apart around any of it. Night presses at the shutters of the Judengasse. The gates will close from sunset to sunrise, as ever. Inside, the family writes a few more lines by candlelight, folds them cleanly, seals them, and sends Europe forward by morning. The June light in London reaches Nathan Rothschild through dusty panes at Newcourt. It turns the paper edges pale gold. It finds yesterday's mud drying on the stair. He has just sat down at his desk with bread, coffee, and a knife gone slightly blunt. The coffee smells dark and steady. The bread leaves a neat crescent of crumbs beside a pile of bills. Then the courier arrives, as he always does, at the exact wrong moment. His boots mark the floorboards with wet half-moons. His hat looks as if the road itself has tried to keep it. He holds out a sealed packet with one hand and quiet apology with the other. He seems, as ever, both heroic and faintly sorry about the timing. Nathan takes the packet and feels the stiff crackle of paper under wax. The seal is rough from travel. The string is dark where rain has touched it. Outside, wheels pass over the street stones with a slow grinding sound. Inside, a clerk stills his pen. Even the room's smell of ink and hot metal seems to wait. The news has crossed the channel faster than the government's own rider. It has changed horses, hands, and roads with practiced ease. The family network works like 19th century email, only with better wax and worse weather. Nathan reads quickly and then once again more slowly. His face changes very little. Anyone hoping for a trumpet would be disappointed by this household's devotion to paper. Napoleon has been beaten at Waterloo. The words themselves are plain. They sit on the pages neatly as a list of tea and lamp oil. Nathan folds the paper along its old crease. He puts it inside his coat. The coat is good dark cloth and faintly warm from his body. He does not leap up and shout. He asks for another candle to be trimmed. He tells a clerk to fetch the latest prices from the exchange. This is how very large turns often enter the room. Not with thunder, with a damp packet, a boot print, and a man reaching for his spectacles. The office around him is ordinary in the firm, comforting way that money offices often are. A sand shaker sits by the ledgers. Wax dots the table like old berries. A pile of correspondence waits in tied bundles on a side chair. Some letters smell faintly of smoke. Others carry the salt smell of travel and river fog. Nathan's hand goes once to the coat pocket and then away again. The habit is small and almost tender. It is the touch a person gives to something heavy and invisible. He leaves for the stock exchange in the same coat and the same plain manner. The street air is cooler than the room. It tastes of horses, coal, and the morning's damp stone. London is already making its usual racket. Porters call to each other near the carts. A fish seller's cry cuts through the softer sounds of shoes and carriage wheels. Nathan moves through it with that hard inward speed that looks almost slow. He has done this walk many times. He knows which paving stones wobble and which doorsteps smell of beer. At the exchange, the air is warmer and used by many bodies. It smells of wool, sealing wax, sweat, and old paper. The floor has been polished by years of anxious shoes. He takes his place and becomes still. This is one of his gifts. Other men flutter, whisper, pivot, and rustle, while Nathan somehow manages to resemble furniture with intentions. People have joked that he could be used as a landmark. They are not entirely wrong. A man looking for the south side of the room might reasonably begin with Nathan Rothschild's left shoulder. In his pocket sits news worth more than silver stacked to a ceiling. On his face sits almost nothing at all. He knows the value of a quiet mouth. What followed that day has been told in so many ways that it now travels with extra embroidery. Some stories make him a magician. Some make him a villain in a very expensive coat. The truth is less theatrical and much more like work. He watches prices. He listens to the room breathe, hesitate, and misread itself. He had learned long ago that markets are full of people studying each other's eyebrows. A lifted chin can be worth a rumor. A turned back can make a dozen men suddenly thoughtful. So Nathan stands almost unnaturally calm and lets others do the fretting. He buys where buying makes sense. He sells where selling serves a larger design. There is no cackling triumph in it. There is also a great deal of waiting while someone else locates the correct paper. Clerks pass near him with ink on their fingers and folded notes in their sleeves. One drops a pencil and reddens. Another whispers a number twice before trusting it. Around this still center, prices move in nervous little tides. Men who are certain one minute become less certain the next. The room lives on partial news and full confidence. Nathan has the better news and keeps it buttoned inside his coat. The button itself is slightly loose. It would have annoyed his mother Guttel, who trusted neither loose buttons nor grand claims. By the time the official dispatch arrives, the room has already felt his weather. The news becomes public. Suddenly, many faces discover that hindsight has always been their favorite talent. The official rider gets the glory of uniform and state. Nathan's man got there first with mud on his cuffs. History has a soft spot for trumpets, though ledgers usually prefer boots. Long before Waterloo became a word on everyone's lips, Nathan's days had already been filled with Britain's costly needs. War, viewed from a counting house, is mostly shortages with signatures. It asks for coin, credit, transport, and patience in bulk. He had spent years arranging funds that moved like hidden water under Europe's roads. Gold had to reach armies, subsidies had to reach allies, bills had to be honored before tempers spoiled. This meant lists, always lists. How many chests were ready? Which route was safer after rain? Whether a mule cart or river boat would complain less. The sums were immense, though their handling remained stubbornly ordinary. Men counted sovereigns on velvet trays. Clerks checked columns with dry lips and stained cuffs. A loan begins in very plain places. A pen scratches. A clerk trims a quill. Someone asks for more sand because the ink refuses to dry politely. Nathan's office knew the smell of heated sealing wax better than many kitchens knew cinnamon. Dispatch boxes sat under tables. Their brass corners were rubbed pale by restless shoes. He dealt with ministers who needed money by Tuesday and certainty by breakfast. He could usually provide one of those. The other was not sold anywhere in Europe. Britain's war effort rested partly on networks like his, because armies marched on coin before they marched on boots. Gold could cross borders where trust often stumbled. The Rothschilds specialized in making trust travel. They bought bullion, moved specie, discounted bills, and found ways around delays that would have stopped slower houses. A government might have flags and drums. Nathan had faster correspondence and better rates. That was the family habit from Frankfurt onward. In the Judengasse, Mayer Amschel had learned to read a room by candlelight and count value by touch. The lane smelled of tallow, old parchment, and the iron tang of coin. It had been barely wide enough for two people to pass without discussing each other's laundry. The gates shut from sunset to sunrise. Amenities were, as modern estate agents might admit, aggressively non-existent. Yet from that narrow lane came a wide habit of attention. Shelves bowed under ledgers. Velvet coin trays held small kingdoms in metal form. Mayer had taught his sons to think of distance as a thing that could be managed. One son in Frankfurt, one in Vienna, one in London, one in Naples, one in Paris. So while Europe argued in uniforms, the brothers worked in handwriting. They wrote every day, and often more than once. Their family system tied capitals together with ink, horses, and steady nerves. A prince in one city needed funds. A merchant in another needed bills accepted. A ministry somewhere else needed discretion, speed, and an exchange rate treated as a personal favor. Wilhelm of Hesse-Kassel had made an art form of such requests. Every letter seemed to ask for terms sweeter than the last. Not one ever paused to say thank you, which remained almost impressive. Nathan knew the family rule about clients like that. Let them feel indispensable if it keeps them calm. The ledger will know better and tell the truth later. The strange charm of the Rothschild system was that it did not think in single flags. It thought in obligations, routes, timings, and balances. Governments fought one another while still requiring the same patient services. The brothers might help move funds for Britain, deal with courts in Austria, and keep relations in places that would not share a dinner table. This sounds scandalous only if one forgets what bankers actually sell. They sell passage across uncertainty. A bill of exchange does not salute. A courier does not ask a horse for its politics. He asks only whether it can keep going to the next post station. That broad web required endless domestic routine. Letters had to be copied before they left. Numbers had to be checked after supper. Seals had to cool before the packet could be tied. There were always small irritations under the grand design. A clerk sneezed on fresh sand. Candle grease dripped where no grease should ever have dared. A courier arrived just after someone had finally sat down. Nathan's letters from London often demanded more capital and quicker routes from his brothers. He usually sounded as though the entire continent were moving too slowly on purpose. Annoyingly for everyone else, he was often right. By 1815, the family had become useful to so many governments that usefulness itself was turning into power. Not power with crowns. Power with chairs, tables, pens, and immediate answers. After Waterloo, that usefulness deepened into something almost public, though it still wore private clothes. Europe needed loans for peace as badly as it had needed them for war. Debts had not vanished because cannons had grown quiet. States wanted to rebuild credit, settle accounts, and breathe without checking every road for cavalry. They needed houses that could place large loans and gather investors from several cities at once. Very few families could do that before lunch. The Rothschilds could, provided lunch was not disturbed too often by messengers. Paris, Vienna, London, Naples, and Frankfurt now formed a kind of family switchboard. Each office knew the other's habits, tempers, and preferred paper sizes. Their letters crossed borders with a speed that made kings look slightly old-fashioned. Official dispatch riders wore state colors and enjoyed ceremony. Rothschild couriers wore mud and enjoyed arriving before dinner. Soon, governments treated the brothers less like ordinary bankers and more like a service no modern ministry would willingly misplace. They could place bonds, steady markets, move bullion, and whisper the latest rates across Europe. It was almost a central bank, except no one had yet invented the proper committee. Other great houses watched with smooth concern. The Baring brothers remained polished, courteous, and consistently surprised by this family from Frankfurt. Their manners were exquisite, which is one pleasant way to lose slowly. Nathan never needed much polishing. He needed accurate figures and enough candles. A grand room interested him less than a quick courier and a clerk who could add without romance. Still, the world around the family was changing from lane houses to palaces and marble halls. Contracts grew larger, corridors grew wider, the sums gained extra zeros and more attentive servants. Back in Frankfurt, Gödel remained unimpressed by all this enlargement. She saw no reason to leave the old house if the roof still held. Palaces, to her eye, were only more rooms to dust. Her refusal gave the whole enterprise a useful shape. However high the family climbed, some part of it still belonged to narrow stairs and careful housekeeping. Grandeur was permitted, but only if the accounts balanced and the soup stayed warm. So the hidden history of the 5 Arrows is not really hidden in the end. It lies in repeated days like this one. A damp letter arrives, a man grows still, Europe shifts by evening. Nathan's coat pocket on that June day held victory news before the government possessed it in public form. Yet the true secret sat elsewhere. It lived in years of habit, trust, copying, counting, sealing, sending, and beginning again. That is how a family from a cramped Frankfurt lane became the quiet hinge of a continent. Not by magic, by routine so well kept that even kings found themselves waiting for the post. It is pleasant to look back once more at the lane where all of this began. The Judengasse is still narrow enough to make a polite sidestep feel like diplomacy. It still holds the mixed smell of tallow candles, old parchment, damp wood, and the iron tang of coin. Above the red shield, Mayer Amschel once worked in rooms that seemed much too small for history. There were velvet trays for coins, there were shelves that bowed under ledgers. There were letters stacked in careful piles, each one promising work rather than rest. That little counting room could not see London or Paris from its window. It reached them anyway. It is nice to remember Mayer first as a dealer in old coins. He turned a small disk of silver in the light and read its age with his fingers. He knew a worn edge. He knew a clipped rim. He knew what a prince would pay for rarity and what he only claimed he would pay. That quiet trade was the seed. The tree grew into 5 branches before anyone had finished clearing the supper things. Then there is Gödel, who may be the calmest rebuke wealth has ever received. Her sons can offer grand houses with long drives, high mirrors, and staircases designed mainly to make entrances feel expensive. She sees no urgent charm in any of it. The Judengasse house suits her. The pots are near at hand. The linen is where it belongs. The windows open the way she expects. The floorboards speak a language she already knows. History keeps trying to hand her a palace, and she keeps replying that the kitchen here is perfectly good. It remains one of the most soothing acts of defiance in Europe. The family also carries those 5 arrows into view. They are simple enough for a child to draw before bed. They are strong enough to stand for a continent of work. Amschel keeps the home house in Frankfurt. Salomon makes Vienna feel less distant. Nathan turns London into a place where a letter from the family can move faster than a rumor. Karl gives Naples its place in the pattern. James makes Paris glitter with credit, confidence, and very large curtains. The arrows point apart, but the binding stays firm. That is the whole trick. And among the palaces, the estates, and the marble corridors that later shine under careful lamps, one quieter achievement matters in an older way. The family uses its place, its access, and its stubborn patience to press for the civic emancipation of Frankfurt's Jews. There is no trumpet for that work. There is paper. There are visits. There are requests repeated until they stop sounding like requests. The locked gates of the lame do not define forever. The old inward-facing exclusivity begins at last to loosen. By the end, the mind returns not to the marble, but to the room with the ledger. The page is checked once more. The column holds. The book is closed. The last candle is pinched dark. The warmth lingers in the air for one gentle moment. Then even the counting room is still. Now the story can rest in that small pocket of quiet between the shut book and the dark lane where the work of the day has finally given way to soft night air. The far capitals can grow dim, the marble can cool, and the last faint sound of a courier on the road can sink so gently into distance that it feels almost like sleep. And Gödel naturally is still in the Judengasse house, unmoved by title, marble, or fuss, because she has never seen much reason to change what works. May your dreams be free of demanding landgraves, requesting a more favorable rate at closing time. May your letters always arrive before the news does, and may your sealing wax never drip on the wrong column of figures. May your ledgers balance on the first count, and may no anxious prince ever knock on your door before the candles are lit. Thank you for listening. May the mind rest easy, and good night.